My grandfather, Arthur, left me his entire estate worth $7.5 million. But the moment the lawyer read those words aloud, the room didn't erupt in cheers. It went dead silent. I was sitting in the grand library of the estate, surrounded by the smell of old leather and the lingering scent of funeral lilies. Across from me sat my parents, Brian and Andrea, and my younger sister, Michelle. They looked perfect, polished, like they belonged in a magazine spread about grief done elegantly, and they were grinning. Not a happy grin, a predatory one. The kind of smile you give a child who is holding something too heavy for them. Don't worry, Catherine, my father said, his voice smooth, dripping with that fake concern he had perfected over decades. We know this is overwhelming. $7 million is a lot of responsibility for someone in your line of work, my mother chimed in, patting my hand with her manicured fingers. Exactly. Darling, you fix old houses. You don't manage portfolios. We will take the burden off your shoulders. We will handle everything. Michelle was already live streaming from the corner, panning her phone around the room as if she was scouting locations for her next lifestyle vlog. They thought it was a done deal. They thought I was still the scared 18-year-old they had kicked out into a snowstorm. They thought I would just hand it over. But then the lawyer cleared his throat. He turned the page of the will, the paper rustling loud in the quiet room. There is an additional clause, he said, his eyes flicking to me, regarding control of the assets. My father's smile faltered. Clause? What clause? The lawyer adjusted his glasses. It states that Catherine is to have sole, absolute, and immediate control over all assets, properties, and liquid funds. Furthermore, any attempt by family members to contest, manage, or interfere with her administration will result in their immediate disinheritance from any future trusts. The grin vanished from my father's face so fast it was almost comical. My mother pulled her hand away from mine like I had burned her. I looked at them, really looked at them. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel small. I felt like the person who owned the building they were sitting in. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community, to understand why that moment in the library felt like oxygen filling my lungs after holding my breath for a decade. You have to understand the night I stopped being their daughter. I was 18. It was January in Boston, and a blizzard was burying the city. Most families were inside, warm, arguing about what movie to watch. I was standing on the front porch with 2 trash bags full of clothes. Trade school. My father had spat the words out like they were a disease. We were standing in the foyer, the heat from the house spilling out behind him. But he blocked the door. You want to go to trade school? You want to be a laborer? I want to restore historic homes. Dad, I had pleaded, shivering. It is a skill. It is art. It is manual labor, my mother had said from the stairs, not even coming down to look at me. People like us don't work with our hands. Catherine, we hire people who work with their hands. If you choose this low-class path, you are not choosing us. And if you aren't choosing us, my father added, his voice cold and final, we aren't paying for you. We aren't housing you. You figure it out. And then he closed the door. He locked it. I remember standing there, the snow soaking through my sneakers, listening to the deadbolt slide home. I didn't cry. I was too shocked to cry. I walked 3 miles to a friend's house in that storm. I lost feeling in my toes. I lost the illusion that their love was unconditional. 8 years later, sitting in that library, the dynamic hadn't changed. It had just evolved. They weren't yelling anymore. Yelling is for when you think you might lose control. Now, they used something far more insidious, weaponized concern. Catherine, my mother said, her voice dropping to that soft, pitying register she used for charity cases. We aren't trying to control you. We are just worried. You know how you get overwhelmed. Remember when you couldn't figure out the subway schedule in high school? She brought up a mistake I made when I was 14. 14. And the taxes. My father sighed, shaking his head. Property taxes on an estate like this. It is complex. Katie, it is not like fixing a leaky pipe. You need sophistication. You need experience. They framed their greed as protection. They painted my competence as a liability. They looked at my hands, calloused from sanding wood, stained with varnish. And they didn't see skill. They saw dirt. You are right, I said quietly. They brightened, thinking I was capitulating. I don't know anything about managing a portfolio, I continued, my voice steady. But I know a lot about rot. I know how to spot a foundation that is crumbling. Even when the paint looks fresh, I looked my father dead in the eye. And I know when someone is trying to sell me a bridge. The air in the room changed. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was charged. They didn't know it yet. But the girl who shivered on the porch was gone. The woman sitting across from them had spent 8 years stripping away layers of paint to find the truth underneath. And I was just getting started. I didn't argue with them. I didn't scream about the snowstorm or the 8 years of silence. I just stood up, thanked the lawyer, and walked out of the library. My parents stayed behind, whispering furiously, probably already planning their next angle. I walked through the heavy oak doors and into the main hall of the estate. Grandpa Arthur's house. My house now, to anyone else. This place was a palace. Gilded moldings, marble floors, chandeliers that cost more than my first car. But I wasn't anyone else. I was a restoration expert. I walked to the grand staircase and ran my hand along the banister. I felt the slight vibration. The wood was dry. Thirsty. I looked up at the ceiling in the foyer. To my parents. It was a masterpiece. To me, I saw the faintest yellow stain spreading near the crown molding. Water damage. Slow leak. Second floor bathroom. Likely. I walked into the ballroom. I knelt down and pressed my palm against the parquet floor. It was cold. Too cold. The radiant heating was shot. I spent the next 2 hours touring my inheritance. I didn't see a fortune. I saw a patient in critical condition. The roof flashing was failing. The masonry in the west wing was spalling. The electrical system was a fire hazard waiting to happen. My parents saw $7 million. I saw a building that was screaming for help, and that is when it hit me. The realization that would become my armor. They couldn't save this place. Even if I handed them the keys right now. They wouldn't know what to do. They would hire the wrong people. Overpay for cosmetic fixes. And let the bones of the house rot away while they threw parties in the dining room. Merit, that was the difference between us. They believed they deserved this house because of their bloodline. I deserved it because I was the only one who knew how to keep it standing. I thought about the years I spent scraping by. The nights I slept in my truck because I couldn't afford rent and tuition for my certification courses. The days I spent breathing in sawdust and paint fumes. Learning the chemistry of old wood. The physics of stone. I remembered the silence of those years. For a long time, I thought my silence was weakness. I thought I didn't fight back because I was scared. But walking through these empty, echoing halls, I realized something else. Silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes, silence is just the sound of someone working while they were at gala dinners. I was learning to read blueprints while they were buying status. I was building skill. I had built a fortress of competence around myself. Brick by brick. In the dark where they couldn't see me. And now, standing in the center of this crumbling legacy, I knew that my low-class trade was the only thing that had any real value here. I pulled out my phone and called my foreman. "Hey," I said, "clear my schedule for next week. I have got a big job." "Where?" he asked. "Home," I said. "I am at home." I hung up and looked at the yellow stain on the ceiling again. They wanted to manage the estate? They wanted to handle the burden? Fine. Let them try. But first, they were going to have to get through the person who actually knew where the bodies and the dry rot were buried. 3 days after the funeral, I drove up the winding driveway to find a moving truck parked in front of the main entrance. Not a contractor's truck. A residential moving truck. I parked my beat-up pickup next to it and walked inside. The foyer was filled with boxes. And there, directing 2 movers who looked exhausted, was my sister, Michelle. She was holding her phone up, ring light attached, talking to her invisible audience. "And this," she was saying, spinning around, "is going to be the content studio. Look at this natural light. You guys, we are going to do so many unboxings here. It is officially the new HQ." She spotted me and didn't even pause the stream. "Oh. Look, it is my big sister. The new landlady. Say hi." "Catherine!" She shoved the phone in my face. I pushed it away gently but firmly. "Michelle," I said, my voice low. "What are you doing?" "Moving in," she chirped, finally lowering the phone. "Mom and Dad said it was fine. I mean, this place is huge. Katie, you can't live here alone. It is creepy. Plus, I can help you decorate. No offense. But your style is a little rustic." Before I could answer, my parents walked out of the library. My father was holding a stack of papers. My mother was holding a tape measure. They had made themselves at home. "Catherine, my father said, his tone brisk. Businesslike. Good. You are here. We need to sign some things. He laid the papers out on the antique hall table. I have been looking into the property taxes and the upkeep costs, he said, tapping the document. It is astronomical. You are going to be underwater in 6 months. This is a management agreement. It authorizes me to handle the liquidity and sets up a family trust to shelter the assets. It is for your own protection, my mother added, stepping forward. You fix houses. Honey, you don't understand tax shelters. You don't understand the market. If you try to do this yourself, the IRS is going to eat you alive. They were doing it again. The pincer move. Michelle occupying the space physically. My parents occupying it legally. They were surrounding me, suffocating me with their help. I am not signing anything, I said. My father's face hardened. Don't be stubborn. This isn't a game. This is millions of dollars. You are out of your depth. Am I? I asked. Yes, he snapped. Look at you. You are wearing work boots to a business meeting. You think you can sit across from bankers and lawyers and have them take you seriously? They will laugh you out of the room. I looked at the papers. I looked at Michelle, who was already instructing the movers to take a priceless rug out of the room because it clashed with her vibe. I felt a cold calm settle over me. I need to make a call, I said. I walked out to the porch, leaving them standing there. I didn't call a lawyer. I called the one person Grandpa Arthur had told me to trust in his final letter. A man named Mr. Henderson, his private accountant. Mr. Henderson, I said when he picked up. It is Catherine. I need to see the books. Not the ones my father is showing me. The real ones. We met an hour later at a diner in town. Mr. Henderson was a small man with thick glasses and a nervous tick in his eye. He handed me a folder. Your grandfather wanted you to have this immediately, he said. He knew they would come. I opened the folder. It wasn't just estate records. It was a dossier on my parents. I scanned the pages, and my breath hitched. Credit card debt, $400,000. Second mortgage on their own home, defaulted. Failed investments in tech startups that didn't exist. My parents weren't rich. They were drowning. They had been living on credit and Grandpa Arthur's handouts for a decade. The investment banker persona my father wore was a costume. He hadn't made a successful trade since 2008. And my mother's charity board seat, bought with donations she put on credit cards she couldn't pay. They are broke, I whispered. Completely. Mr. Henderson said. Technically, they are insolvent. They have been borrowing from your grandfather to pay the interest on their debts for years. I closed the folder. The pieces clicked into place. The condescension. The desperate need to manage the estate. The way they treated me like I was incompetent. It wasn't just cruelty. It was projection. They were projecting their own failure onto me. They called me incapable because they were the ones who had lost everything. They called me dirty because they needed to believe their clean hands were still worth something. Even as those hands were empty, they weren't trying to save me from the IRS. They were trying to save themselves from eviction. I paid the bill and stood up. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said. What are you going to do? He asked. I am going to go back home, I said. And I am going to help my family pack. I didn't kick them out that night. I let them stay. I let Michelle set up her ring lights in the parlor. I let my father spread his spreadsheets across the dining room table. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had won. Just for a moment longer. Arrogance is a funny thing. It blinds you. It makes you think the silence of your enemy is submission. When really, it is just them loading the gun. 2 days later, the summons arrived. A process server handed it to me right in the driveway as I was unloading lumber. My father watched from the window, sipping coffee. He didn't even try to hide it. I opened the envelope. Emergency motion for conservatorship. I scanned the legal jargon. Petitioners: Brian and Andrea Miller. Reason: lack of capacity. History of instability. Educational deficiency. They were claiming I was too stupid to manage my own money because I didn't have a college degree. They were using my trade, the very thing that had saved me, as evidence of my diminished capacity. I looked up at the window. My father raised his mug in a mock toast. An hour later, I got an email from their lawyer, a shark from a high-end Boston firm, Ms. Miller. In light of the filing, we suggest a meeting to discuss a settlement. If you agree to a voluntary co-trusteeship with your parents, we will withdraw the petition. We have scheduled a conference room for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please attend. It was a trap. A classic intimidation tactic. Get the simple tradesgirl into a room full of suits. use big words, threaten to drag her name through the public mud, and watch her fold. They thought I would be terrified. They thought I would see a courtroom and freeze. They forgot one thing. I deal with structural failure for a living. I know exactly what happens when you put too much weight on a rotten beam. I didn't call a lawyer to defend me. I didn't need to defend myself. I went to my truck and grabbed the heavy red binder Mr. Henderson had given me. The one labeled promissory notes. I spent the night memorizing it. Every date, every amount, every signature. The next morning, I put on my best suit. No. I put on clean work pants, a crisp white button-down, and my boots. I wasn't going to dress up as them. I was going to show up as me. I walked into the law firm's glass-walled conference room at exactly 9:59 a.m. My parents were there, flanked by 3 lawyers. Michelle was there, looking bored but supportive. The table was enormous, polished mahogany that probably cost more than my first renovation project. Catherine, their lead lawyer said, not standing up. He gestured to a single chair on the opposite side of the table. Glad you could make it. We have the papers ready for signature. It is a standard agreement. Your parents become co-trustees. They handle the complex investing. You get a generous monthly allowance. Everyone wins. And if I don't sign? I asked. Remaining standing, then we proceed with the competency hearing. My father said, his voice smooth. We will bring in witnesses. Catherine, we will discuss your lifestyle, your living conditions for the last 8 years. We will paint a picture of a young woman who is struggling, who is erratic. It will be public. It will be embarrassing. For you, my mother added softly. We are just trying to save you from that. They looked so confident, so sure of their power. They thought they held all the cards because they knew the language of the elite. I reached into my bag. I didn't bring a lawyer, I said. My father smirked. That was a mistake. No, I said. I didn't bring a lawyer because I don't need to argue the law. I brought this. I slammed the red binder onto the table. The sound cracked like a whip in the silent room. What is that? The lawyer asked, frowning. That, I said, is the reason we aren't going to have a competency hearing. I sat down, opened the binder, and looked at my father. Shall we begin? I flipped the binder open to the first tab. The room was silent, save for the hum of the expensive HVAC system. You filed for conservatorship based on my financial incompetence, I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room without shouting. You claim I can't handle money. I pulled out a document and slid it across the mahogany table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of the lead lawyer. That is a promissory note dated 2014. I said, borrower, Brian Miller. Lender, Arthur Miller. Amount, $800,000. Purpose, investment capital. Status, defaulted. My father's face went gray. I pulled out another one. Slide, 2016. Borrower, Andrea Miller. Amount, $400,000. Purpose, lifestyle maintenance. Status, defaulted. Slide, 2018. Refinance of personal home. Co-signed by Arthur Miller. Currently 3 months in arrears. Slide, slide, slide. Paper after paper hit the table. The lawyer picked up the first one, his eyes scanning it rapidly. He looked at my father, then back at the paper. The smugness was draining out of him, replaced by the cold calculation of a man realizing his client had lied to him. These are private family loans, my father stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. Dad never intended to collect these. Actually, I said, pulling out the final document. He did. I held up a notarized addendum to the will. This is the debt assignment clause. Upon his death, all outstanding debts owed to the estate are transferred to the sole heir. That is me. I leaned forward. I am not the defendant here. Dad, I am the creditor, and you are the delinquent borrower. I opened a spreadsheet on my tablet and turned it around so they could see the total. $4.2 million. I read the number aloud. That is the total principal and interest you owe the estate. And according to the terms of these notes, the death of the lender triggers an immediate call clause. The full amount is due today. My mother let out a small, strangled sound. Michelle looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. You can't do that, my mother whispered. We don't have that kind of money. I know, I said. I saw your credit reports. You are broke. I looked at the high-powered lawyer. So here is where we stand. You are suing me for competence. But if we go to court, I will introduce these debts as evidence. I will prove that the people claiming I am unfit are actually insolvent debtors who have been living off the man they are trying to rob. I stood up and walked around the table, stopping behind my father's chair. You called me a failure because I work with my hands, I said softly. But my hands paid my rent for 8 years. Your hands just signed IOUs. Catherine, please. My father hissed, his voice trembling. This will ruin us. Ruin you? I repeated his words, testing the weight of them. You borrowed against your own future to play dress-up. You ruined yourselves years ago. I am just the auditor who finally checked the books. The lawyer stood up. He didn't look at my parents. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. Ms. Miller, he said, packing his briefcase with efficient, sharp movements. It appears there is a conflict of interest here. I was retained to represent the trustees of a solvent estate, not to defend debtors against a creditor. I will be withdrawing my counsel. He walked out. The door clicked shut, sealing the silence. My mother slumped into her chair, the fight draining out of her like water from a cracked vase. Catherine, she wept. But it wasn't the soft, manipulative crying she used to get her way. This was the ugly, gasping, sobbing of someone who realizes the safety net is gone. We are your family. You can't put us on the street. Where will we go? Michelle looked up from her phone, her face pale. The live stream was off. Reality had finally crashed the chat. Wait, she said, her voice trembling. If they lose their house, where do I live? I looked at them. The 3 people who had defined my worth by my bank account and my job title for my entire life. I waited for the guilt to come. I waited for that familiar ache. The urge to fix it for them. To be the good daughter one last time. It never came. All I felt was the structural integrity of my own resolve. You have 30 days, I said. My father looked up, his eyes bloodshot. What? The collateral for the 2018 loan was your house, I explained, my voice flat. Transactional. I am calling the debt. Since you cannot pay, I am foreclosing on the collateral. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days? My father sputtered. That is impossible. It is standard, I said, and it is more than you gave me. You gave me 10 minutes to pack before you locked me out in a blizzard. I picked up the red binder. It felt lighter now. If you are out in 30 days, and if you sign a document waiving all future claims to Grandpa Arthur's estate, I won't sue you for the remaining balance. I will consider the debt settled. I turned to leave. Catherine! My mother screamed, desperate now. We are your parents. I stopped at the door. I didn't look back. I know, I said, and I am your landlord. Tick-tock. I walked out of the conference room, down the plush hallway, and out into the cool Boston air. I didn't check to see if they were following. I didn't care. The seasons changed. The leaves turned gold, then brown, then fell, leaving the trees bare against the gray sky. The snow came back, piling up in drifts against the stone foundations of the estate. But this time, I wasn't shivering on the outside trying to get in. I was 40 feet up in the air, standing on scaffolding, the wind biting at my cheeks. Watch the mortar mix, I said, pointing to the trowel in the hand of the 19-year-old apprentice beside me. Too wet and it freezes before it sets. Too dry and it crumbles. The kid nodded, focused, scraping the excess off the brick. He reminded me of myself. Quiet, eager, hands already rough from work. He was one of the first students in the Arthur Miller School of Preservation, the trade program I had started in the estate's carriage house. I looked out over the property. The roof was fixed. The water damage was gone. The rot had been cut out, replaced with solid, treated oak. My parents were gone. They had moved into a small rental 2 towns over. Michelle was working retail, learning for the first time that influencer isn't a retirement plan. They tried to call sometimes, usually when a bill was due. But my assistant blocked the numbers. I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them. I realized that for years, I had been trying to restore a relationship that was structurally unsound. I had been trying to paint over mold. I looked at the stone wall I was repairing. It was strong. It would stand for another 100 years, because it was built on merit, on skill, on truth. Looks good, the apprentice said, stepping back to admire his work. It is solid. I agreed. I took a deep breath of the cold air. It didn't smell like rejection anymore. It smelled like sawdust and stone. It smelled like home. Grandpa Arthur was right. They couldn't take what I didn't give them. and I had finally stopped giving them my power. I was the architect now, and I had a lot of building left to do. We have all had people who underestimated us because we didn't fit their mold. If you have ever had to build your own success in silence, tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one.